The pine wreath on my front door still smelled fresh when Lauren showed up that Wednesday morning, December 18th, without calling first. I'd been sipping Earl Grey at my kitchen table in Washington Park, watching cardinals peck at the feeder outside, when her Audi pulled into the driveway with that aggressive crunch of gravel I'd come to recognize. The dry air bit at my throat. Denver winters do that. Steal moisture right out of your lungs, and through the window I could see the faint haze over the Front Range. No snow in sight despite it being the third week of December. 48 hours. "Mom," she said, standing in my entryway in her charcoal suit, briefcase still in hand, no hug, no "how are you?" Just those 3 words, cold as the 25-degree morning outside. I set my teacup down slowly, felt the tremor in my hand that's been there since the small stroke 2 years back. 48 hours for what, sweetheart? To pack your things and move out. Nate and I close on the Highlands property January 2nd. We need this house staged and listed by New Year's. She glanced around my living room, at the nativity set on the mantel, the string of white lights I'd draped across the bookshelf, the faded oriental rug her father and I bought in 1982. The realtor comes Friday for photos. My throat tightened. 73 years on this earth, and I'd never heard my own daughter speak to me like I was a tenant behind on rent. "Lauren, this is my home. I've lived here since 1978, I know." She checked her watch, a slim silver thing that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "But legally it's mine. Dad left it to me in the trust. You've had 6 years to figure out a new arrangement. The trust. Of course. After Richard died, the lawyers had explained it all in language that felt like marbles rolling around in my head. Remainder interests, life estates, contingent provisions. I'd signed papers I didn't fully understand because Lauren assured me it was just paperwork and I could stay as long as I wanted. Now, apparently my wanting had an expiration date. Outside, a jogger passed on the sidewalk, breath visible in the cold. The house suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. I thought of the photo albums in the attic, Richard's old fly fishing gear in the garage, the pencil marks on the doorframe tracking Lauren's height from age 6 to 16. How do you pack 46 years into 48 hours? What about Christmas? My voice came out smaller than I intended. It's a week away. Lauren's jaw tightened, just a flicker, the same tell she's had since she was a teenager, lying about whose party she'd been to. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful. She turned toward the door, heels clicking on the hardwood. I'll send Nate with boxes tomorrow. The door closed behind her with a soft click, not a slam. Somehow that felt worse. I sat back down at the table, my tea gone cold, and stared at the empty bird feeder swinging in the breeze. Through the window, I could see the lights starting to glow on South Pearl Street, a few blocks over, where the shops were already decked out for the season. Everyone preparing for joy, for family, for tradition. And here I was, being evicted by my own daughter 7 days before Christmas, with nothing but a Bengali and 48 hours to figure out where a 73-year-old woman goes when her child decides she's no longer welcome. The Cardinals didn't come back that afternoon. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Lauren's words, the flatness in her eyes, the way she wouldn't look at me when she said 48 hours. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on rest and went to the hall closet, pulled down the box marked Photos 1995-2005 in Richard's neat block letters. I knew what I was looking for. Christmas 1999. We were living in Littleton then, in a smaller ranch house near Clement Park, before Richard's promotion let us buy this place in Wash Park. Lauren was 16, all elbows and attitude. Her hair dyed an unfortunate shade of burgundy that she swore was artistic. She'd been accepted into a prestigious summer program at Northwestern, debate camp, full scholarship, but it meant missing our annual Christmas trip to Estes Park, the one tradition we'd held sacred since she was 7. I found the photo I was looking for. Lauren and me in front of our Littleton tree, a slightly crooked Douglas fir Richard had insisted was full of character. She's wearing the navy sweater I'd knitted for her, and I've got my arm around her shoulders. We're both smiling, but if you look close, really close, you can see the tension around her mouth. That morning, December 25th, 1999, a Saturday, Lauren had come downstairs late, found me packing ornaments into storage bins. "What are you doing?" she'd asked. "Taking down the decorations," I'd said, tissue paper crinkling in my hands. "You're leaving for Northwestern on the 27th. No point keeping them up if we're not celebrating together." Her face had crumpled. "You said it was okay. You said you understood about the program. I do understand. I'm proud of you." I'd meant it, but something bitter had crept into my voice, some maternal wound I couldn't name. "I just don't see the point of pretending it's Christmas when you'd rather be somewhere else." She'd stood there in her flannel pajamas, the ones with snowflakes, and I'd watched her shut down, the way teenagers do, building walls brick by brick. "Fine," she'd said. "I guess I know where I stand." We'd put the tree back up that afternoon, Richard mediating with his usual gentle insistence. But the damage was done. Lauren spent the rest of the holiday in her room, and when she left for Northwestern 2 days later, she hugged her father, but only waved to me from the car. I'd told myself it was normal teenage stuff, that she'd get over it. She never did. Sitting on my bedroom floor at 73, cardboard box open in my lap, I realized I'd been wrong about a lot of things. I'd thought the grudge would fade. I'd thought unconditional love meant never having to say you're sorry. I'd thought I had more time. Outside, Denver slept under its unseasonably warm December sky, not a flake of snow to soften the edges. I put the photo back in the box, climbed into bed, and dreamed of Christmas trees being packed away before the 25th ever came. When I woke Thursday morning, December 19th, I had 36 hours left, and a plan forming in the back of my mind, one that started with a visit to the cathedral and ended, I hoped, with my daughter remembering who we used to be to each other. St. John's Cathedral sits at the corner of 14th Avenue and Clarkson, all Gothic revival spires and stone buttresses, the kind of building that makes you whisper even on the sidewalk outside. I'd been coming here for years, not every Sunday, but enough that Father Miguel knew my name and my usual pew, third from the back on the left, where the morning light hits the stained glass just right. Thursday morning, December 19th. I drove my 2014 Subaru Outback through light traffic on Spear Boulevard, hands tight on the wheel, my cane propped in the passenger seat. The sky was that crystalline blue you only get in Denver, sharp and cloudless, temperature already climbing toward the unseasonable mid-40s. The news kept calling historically warm. No snow, no Christmas card weather, just dry, relentless sunshine that felt like an accusation. The cathedral was nearly empty at 9 a.m., just a few elderly parishioners scattered among the pews, their heads bowed in private prayer. I lit a candle for Richard, habit even after 6 years, and sat down in my usual spot. The stone walls held a chill that the weak heating system couldn't quite overcome, and I pulled my cardigan tighter. "Evelyn!" Father Miguel appeared from the sacristy, his kind, weathered face breaking into a smile. "I thought that was your car outside." "Father." I gestured to the empty space beside me. "Do you have a minute?" He sat folding his hands in his lap and waited. That's one thing I've always appreciated about him. He doesn't rush you into confession or platitudes. He just waits, lets the silence do its work. "My daughter's giving me 48 hours to leave my house," I said finally. Well, 36 now. She owns it legally. The trust her father set up. The words felt strange in my mouth, like stones I was trying to spit out. I don't know what to do. Father Miguel's face didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Sorrow, maybe, or recognition. Have you talked to her about why? About what's driving this? She says she needs to sell. She and her husband are buying a new place. I twisted my wedding ring, the gold worn thin after 50 years. But that's not really it, Father. There's something older, something I can't quite touch. I think it goes back to when she was 16. I told him about Christmas 1999, about the debate camp and the decorations, and the way I'd let my disappointment poison the holiday. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, looking up at the altar where the Advent candles burned steady. Forgiveness is a funny thing, he said finally. We think of it as this grand gesture, this one-time event. But really it's more like weeding a garden. You have to keep at it, pull up the roots when they come back. He turned to me. Have you asked her to forgive you? I apologized years ago. Multiple times. Apologizing isn't the same as asking for forgiveness, Evelyn. One's about easing your own conscience. The other's about giving the hurt person permission to let go. He patted my hand, his palm warm and papery. And sometimes the hurt person isn't ready. Sometimes they need to see you're serious. I thought about that as I left the cathedral, stepping back into the bright, snowless morning. The Christmas decorations along 14th Avenue looked garish in the sunlight. Plastic Santas and inflatable snowmen, all cheer and no substance. I got in my Subaru and drove east toward Colorado Boulevard. Mind-churning. By the time I pulled into the parking lot at Pete's Kitchen, that 24-hour diner on Colfax where Marjorie and I met for coffee every Thursday, I knew what Father Miguel meant. Lauren didn't need another apology. She needed proof I understood what I'd done. She needed me to do more than say sorry. She needed me to show her I'd carry the consequences. Marjorie was already in our usual booth. Silver hair pulled back in her no-nonsense ponytail. Menu open even though she always ordered the same thing. Scrambled eggs, dry wheat toast, coffee black. She looked up when I slid in across from her, and her face fell. "Oh, honey," she said, reading me the way only a 40-year friendship allows. What happened? I told her everything, the ultimatum, the trust, the 1999 Christmas. When I got to the part about having 36 hours left, she reached across the table and gripped my hand so hard it hurt. "You're staying with me," she said. "No arguments. I've got the guest room, and Lord knows it's just collecting dust since Tom passed." "Marjorie, no." She fixed me with that look, the one that had terrified. Student teachers when she was principal at South? Hi. You're not sleeping in your car or some motel off. I-25. You're coming to my place until we figure this out. The waitress came, took our orders, left. Outside the windows, Denver hummed with pre-holiday traffic. People buying gifts, planning parties, doing all the normal things normal families do in December. I felt like I was watching from underwater. "There's something else," I said quietly. "Something I haven't told Lauren. About the house." Marjorie waited, her coffee cooling between us. I paid the down payment. In 2010, when she and Nate bought their first place in Capitol Hill, they were $40,000 short and the seller wouldn't budge. Lauren called me crying, said they'd lose the house. I traced the rim of my water glass. I took out a home equity line on my place and gave it to her. She swore she'd pay me back, did she? No, and I never asked. But I kept the paperwork. All of it. It's in my safe deposit box at First Bank on Spear. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. "Evelyn Carter, are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" "I don't know what I'm thinking. I just know there's more to this story than she's telling me, and I'm running out of time to find out." We ate in silence after that, the eggs tasteless in my mouth. My mind already 3 steps ahead, to the bank, to the lockbox, to whatever truth was waiting in those yellowed receipts and promissory notes. Outside, the temperature hit 48 degrees by noon. Warm enough that people were walking around in shirt sleeves despite it being December 19th. 7 days until Christmas, and I was hunting for evidence against my own daughter. Father Miguel was right about one thing. Forgiveness was messy work. But he hadn't mentioned it could also be necessary, like surgery, cutting away the infection so something healthier could grow back. I hoped I wasn't too late. First Bank sits on Spear Boulevard near the Whole Foods, a squat brick building with tinted windows that always make me think of surveillance films. I drove there straight from Pete's kitchen, Marjorie following in her Prius for moral support, which I knew meant she didn't trust me not to lose my nerve. Thursday, December 19th, just past 1 p.m., the temperature peaking at 53 degrees, unheard of for mid-December, even in Denver's usual dry winters. The warmth felt wrong, unnatural, like the city itself had forgotten what season it was supposed to be. Inside the bank, the air conditioning was cranked too high, making me pull my cardigan tight. A young teller with a name tag reading Brandon greeted me with the kind of cheerful efficiency that comes from corporate training manuals. "Safe deposit box access," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. "Box 247. He typed something into his computer, frowned slightly. "Mrs. Carter, yes. One moment, please." Marjorie squeezed my elbow. "I'll wait here," she whispered. "You need privacy for this." Brandon led me through the heavy vault door into the narrow room lined with metal drawers, each one holding someone's secrets or treasures or both. Box 247 was waist-high on the left wall. He used his key and mine together, the old-fashioned way, and slid the long metal container out. "Take your time," he said, and left me alone. I carried the box to the small table in the corner and lifted the lid. Inside, my mother's engagement ring, the title to the Subaru, Richard's Purple Heart from Vietnam, and a manila envelope marked Lauren 2010 House in my handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were photocopies of everything. The cashier's check for $40,000 made out to Elevation Title Company, dated April 15th, 2010. The home equity loan documents showing I'd borrowed against my own house to free up the cash. And, this was the part I'd almost forgotten, a handwritten promissory note on yellow legal paper, Lauren's signature at the bottom, promising to repay $40,000 plus 3% interest within 5 years of date signed, April 2010. 5 years would have been April 2015. It was now December 2024. Nearly 10 years overdue, and she'd never mentioned it once. Neither had I, to be fair, but I'd assumed she remembered. I'd assumed it mattered to her the way it mattered to me. Not the money itself, but the gesture. The proof that I'd been there when she needed me. I pulled out my phone and took photos of every page, my arthritic fingers fumbling with the buttons. Then I put everything back in the envelope, back in the box, and signaled for Brandon. "All set?" he asked, cheerful as ever. "For now," I said. Outside, the sunshine hit like a slap. Marjorie was waiting by her Prius, arms crossed, face unreadable. "Well," she said. "I have proof," I said. "She owes me $40,000 from 2010, plus interest." "Never paid it back." Marjorie let out a low whistle. "So what are you going to do? Lawyer up, demand repayment?" "I don't know yet." I leaned against my Subaru, suddenly exhausted. Part of me wants to throw it in her face. Ask her how she can kick me out when I'm the reason she had a house in the first place. And the other part? The other part remembers what Father Miguel said this morning. About forgiveness not being a one-time thing. I looked at my friend. This woman who'd known me through 3 decades of teaching, through Richard's death, through all the small and large indignities of aging. I think I need to talk to her. Really talk. Not just about the money, about all of it. Marjorie nodded slowly. "You've got about 24 hours left before she expects you out. Where are you going to have this conversation?" I thought about that. Not at my house. Too much history, too many ghosts. Not at her office. Too sterile, too much her territory. Somewhere neutral, somewhere public enough that she couldn't storm out, but private enough that we could be honest. Cherry Creek, I said finally. There's that coffee shop in the mall, the one by Anthropology. She likes it there. I'll text her, ask her to meet me tomorrow morning. One last conversation before I go. And if she says no, then I'd pack my things, move into Marjorie's guest room, and spend Christmas wondering where I'd gone wrong as a mother. But I didn't say that out loud. Instead, I hugged my friend, climbed into my Subaru, and drove home through the too warm afternoon. The Front Range glowing in the distance like a promise or a warning. That night, December 19th, I sent Lauren a text. Coffee tomorrow, 10 a.m. Cherry Creek, I need to talk to you before I leave, please. She didn't respond until almost midnight. Fine, but make it quick. 20 words. That's what our relationship had come to, but it was enough. I set my alarm for 7 a.m., laid out my blue wool dress, the one Richard always said made my eyes look like sapphires, and tried to sleep. Outside my window, the temperature dropped to 27 degrees, and the dry wind rattled the bare branches of the ash tree. 7 days until Christmas, and I was preparing for the conversation that might save or shatter what was left of my family. I prayed for snow. Maybe if the world looked like Christmas, we could remember how to act like it. Cherry Creek Shopping Center at 10 a.m. on a Friday before Christmas is controlled chaos. Holiday music piped through speakers, shoppers juggling bags and phones, teenagers clustered near the Apple Store like birds on a wire. I arrived 15 minutes early, December 20th, parked near Nordstrom, and made my way slowly with my cane to the coffee shop tucked between Anthropology and some boutique selling $200 candles. Lauren was already there. Of course she was. Punctuality was her religion, being early her sacrament. She sat at a corner table with a black coffee, checking her phone, still in her work clothes, even though it was Friday morning. Navy suit, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, that same silver watch catching the light. "Hi," I said, lowering myself into the chair across from her. My hip ached from the walk. I'd forgotten to take my morning ibuprofen. "Mom." She didn't look up. "You said you needed to talk, no preamble. No, how did you sleep? Or, would you like coffee? Straight to business, the way she probably handled her corporate clients. I'd raised a stranger in a daughter's body, and I had no one to blame but myself and time and 1,000 small failures of attention. "I went to the bank yesterday," I said. "First Bank, safe deposit box." That got her attention. Her eyes flickered up, wary. "I found the paperwork from 2010, I continued, keeping my voice level. "When I gave you $40,000 for the down payment on your first house. The promissory note you signed, promising to pay me back in 5 years. Lauren set her phone down very carefully, face unreadable. "That was 14 years ago. 15 in April. And you never paid it back. Never even mentioned it." I pulled out my own phone, opened the photos I'd taken. "I have copies of everything. The check, the loan documents, your signature." For a long moment, she just stared at me. Then she laughed. A short, bitter sound that made the barista look over nervously. "Are you seriously threatening me right now?" Lauren said. "With a loan I didn't even ask for?" "You called me crying. You said you'd lose the house. I was 30 years old and panicking. I would have figured it out." She leaned forward, voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that reminded me of her father when he was truly angry. "You gave me that money because you wanted leverage. Because you've always wanted some kind of proof that I need you." The words hit like a physical blow. "That's not true, isn't it?" Her eyes were bright now, not with tears but with something sharper. "Every time I achieve something, you find a way to remind me how you made it possible. The debate camp, you brought it up at my law school graduation. The house down payment, you mentioned it when Nate and I announced our engagement. You collect debts, Mom, emotional ones. And you never let anyone forget what they owe you." My throat felt tight. I never wanted you to feel indebted. I wanted you to know I loved you, that I was there for you. By keeping receipts? By tracking every sacrifice? Lauren shook her head. That's not love. That's accounting. Around us, shoppers moved through the mall, oblivious, carrying their bags of gifts and good intentions. Christmas music played, something instrumental, Tchaikovsky maybe, the Nutcracker Ballet. I thought about Richard, about how he would have handled this with his gentle humor and infinite patience. I thought about Father Miguel's words, asking for forgiveness versus apologizing. You're right, I said quietly. About some of it. I did keep track, not because I wanted leverage, but because I was afraid. Of what? Of being forgotten. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. After you went to college, you barely called. After you got married, you stopped coming home for holidays. And after your father died, I had to stop, swallow hard. I thought if I could prove I was useful, necessary, you'd come back. You'd need me again. Lauren's face softened, just barely around the edges. Mom, but you don't need me. You haven't for a long time. And instead of accepting that, instead of being proud, I held on tighter, made you feel obligated, turned motherhood into a debt you could never pay off. I met her eyes. I'm sorry, not for helping you, but for weaponizing it. She was quiet for a long time, her coffee going cold between us. Outside the windows, Colorado sunshine poured down on the parking lot, unseasonably bright for December 20th. Do you remember Christmas 1999? She asked finally. Every day, you took down the tree. You made it very clear that my dreams, my future, mattered less than your Christmas tradition. She twisted her wedding ring. I was 16. I thought you were proud of me for getting into Northwestern. But all you cared about was being abandoned for the holidays. I was proud. I was also hurt. I handled it badly. You've been handling it badly for 25 years, Mom. Every Christmas, you find some way to make me feel guilty. For not visiting enough? For not calling enough? For not being the daughter you wanted? Her voice cracked just a little. I'm 42 years old, and I still feel like I'm failing you. Every single day. The tears came then, silent and hot, sliding down my cheeks. I didn't brush them away. I don't know how to fix this. Neither do I. Lauren looked at me, really looked, and I saw something shift in her face. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. The first loosening of packed earth. But kicking you out isn't the answer. I see that now. Then why? Because Nate pushed me. He's the one who wants the Highlands property, who convinced me we needed to sell your house to afford it. And I went along with it because... She paused, choosing words carefully. Because some part of me wanted you to know what it felt like. To be set aside for someone else's plans. We sat there, two broken women at a coffee shop table, while Christmas shoppers swirled around us and Tchaikovsky played and the too warm December sunlight made everything feel surreal. I'll find somewhere else to live, I said finally. Marjorie offered her guest room. But I'd like to spend Christmas with you, if you'll have me. One meal, a few hours. No guilt, no debts. Just family. Lauren wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture I remembered from her childhood, from skinned knees and school disappointments. Okay, she said. Christmas. We'll figure out the rest after. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't even peace. But it was a door left open, and for now, that was enough. We finished our coffee, made awkward small talk about her work and my book club, and when we stood to leave, she hugged me. Brief, stiff, but real. I held on maybe a second too long, breathing in her perfume, memorizing the feel of my daughter in my arms. Outside, the parking lot shimmered with heat, and I drove home to pack what was left of my life into boxes, knowing that sometimes the only way forward is to let go of the ground you've been standing on. 24 hours left in my house. 6 days until Christmas, and for the first time in years, I felt something that might eventually turn into hope. December 20th bled into December 21st, somewhere around 2 a.m., and I was still awake, sitting on my living room floor surrounded by cardboard boxes and 30 years of accumulated life. Nate had dropped off the boxes that afternoon as promised, left them on the porch without knocking, and I'd spent the rest of Friday wrapping dishes in newspaper and deciding what mattered enough to keep. Not much, it turned out. When you're moving from a 3-bedroom house to a guest room at your friend's place, you learn real fast what's necessity and what's nostalgia. The photo albums, those came. Richard's Purple Heart, my mother's china. Everything else could go to Goodwill or the curb. The house felt strange at night, hollow in a way it never had when it was truly mine. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like goodbye. I'd lived here since 1978, raised Lauren here, buried my husband from the memorial service we'd held in this living room. These walls knew my laughter and my grief in equal measure, and now I was abandoning them to strangers who'd repaint and stage and erase every trace of the Carters. Around 3 a.m., exhausted but too wired to sleep, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table one last time. That's when I heard the knock. Soft at first, then more insistent. I grabbed my cane and shuffled to the front door, heart pounding. Through the peephole, a man, maybe 60, wearing a Target uniform vest and holding a thermos. I cracked the door open, keeping the chain on. "Can I help you?" "I'm sorry to bother you this late." He had kind eyes, tired around the edges. "I'm Jerry. I work night inventory at the Target on Colorado Boulevard. I saw your car in their parking lot earlier, the Subaru with the Washington Park sticker. You were sitting in it crying. He held up the thermos. "I brought coffee, in case you needed it." For a moment I just stared at him, this stranger on my doorstep at 3 a.m., offering kindness for no reason except he'd seen someone hurting. Then I closed the door, unhooked the chain, and opened it wider. "I'm Evelyn," I said. And yes, I could use some coffee. We sat on the porch steps. The December night surprisingly mild for the hour, still hovering around 30 degrees. No wind, stars sharp overhead despite the city lights. Jerry poured coffee into 2 disposable cups from his vest pocket, and we sat in companionable silence for a while. "You want to talk about it?" he asked finally, so I told him. The whole story, Lauren, the ultimatum, the Christmas of 1999, the money, the conversation at Cherry Creek. Everything I'd been holding in for days, weeks, years, came spilling out to this stranger in a Target vest who'd seen me crying in a parking lot and cared enough to check. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "I got 2 kids," he said. "Grown now. My son, Marcus, we didn't talk for 8 years. 8 years over something so stupid I can't even remember what started it. Just pride, I think. On both sides. How'd you fix it?" I stopped waiting for him to make the first move. Showed up at his apartment with a 6-pack and a pizza, told him I was sorry for whatever I'd done, and we started over. He sipped his coffee. Sometimes the person who needs to bend isn't the one who was wronged. Sometimes it's the one who's tired of being right. We sat there until the coffee was gone and the sky started to lighten in the east, that pale gray blue that comes before dawn in winter. When Jerry stood to leave, he patted my shoulder. "You're going to be okay," he said. I don't know how I know that, but I do. I watched him walk to his car, an old Honda Civic with a dented bumper, and drive away. Then I went back inside, finished packing the kitchen, and fell asleep on the couch just as the sun came up over the Front Range. When I woke at noon, my phone was buzzing. Text from Lauren. "Dad's lawyer just called. There's something in the trust we need to discuss. Can you meet me tomorrow, Sunday, 4 p.m.? My place?" I stared at the message for a long time. Sunday, December 22nd, 4 days before Christmas. Something in the trust. My stomach twisted with equal parts dread and curiosity. I texted back, "I'll be there." Then I called Marjorie. Told her I'd need her guest room starting that night. and spent the rest of Saturday loading boxes into my Subaru. By 6 p.m., the house was empty except for the furniture Lauren would have the estate sale people handle. I stood in the doorway one last time, looking at the bare walls and the hardwood floors Richard and I had refinished ourselves in 1985, and I let myself cry. Not for the house, but for everything it represented. Then I locked the door, left my key under the mat like Lauren had requested, and drove to Marjorie's house in Englewood with my cane, my boxes, and whatever shred of dignity I had left. Sunday would bring answers. Whether I'd like them was another question entirely. Lauren's house in Capitol Hill was one of those renovated Victorians that realtors call charming and normal people call expensive, all restored woodwork and modern appliances. The kind of place featured in Denver Home magazine. I'd only been inside twice, once when they first bought it in 2010, and once for an awkward Thanksgiving in 2018 that ended early when Lauren got called in to work. Sunday, December 22nd, 4 p.m., the sun already low in the sky, temperature dropping from the mid-40s into the 30s as evening approached. I parked on the street, grabbed my cane, and walked up the steps to the front porch where a tasteful wreath hung on the door. Fresh pine and white ribbon. No tackiness, very Lauren. She opened before I could knock. Still in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater, hair down for once, Nate stood behind her in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. "Mom." Lauren stepped aside. "Come in." The interior smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Their tree stood in the front window, white lights and silver ornaments, elegant and impersonal. No handmade decorations, no mismatched colors, nothing like the chaotic, joyful trees we'd had when she was young. "Can I get you something to drink?" Nate asked, playing host. "I'm fine." I sat in the armchair they gestured to, keeping my cane close. "Your text said something about the trust?" Lauren and Nate exchanged a look, one of those married couple silent conversations I recognized from my years with Richard. Then Lauren sat on the couch, pulled a manila folder from the coffee table, and opened it. "Dad's lawyer, Mr. Hendricks, called Friday afternoon," she began. Apparently, there was a clause in the trust that he'd never mentioned because he didn't think it would be relevant. But given recent circumstances, she paused, he thought we should know. "What kind of clause?" "A conditional one." Lauren pulled out a document, turned it so I could see. Legal language, dense and impenetrable, but she pointed to a paragraph halfway down. "It says that if you're ever asked to vacate the Washington Park house for any reason other than medical necessity or your own choice, the house reverts to you outright. Full ownership. The trust is nullified." I stared at the words, reading them twice, then a third time. "I don't understand." "Dad knew me," Lauren said quietly. "He knew I could be cold, pragmatic. He worried that if he left the house to me, I might one day decide it made more financial sense to sell. So he built in protection for you. But you didn't know about this?" "No. Hendricks says Dad told him not to mention it unless it became necessary. He figured as long as I was treating you right, there was no harm in me thinking I owned the place." She closed the folder. "But when I gave you that ultimatum, when I told you to leave in 48 hours, that triggered the clause." The room was very quiet. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. Outside, a car drove past, Christmas music drifting from its open windows. "So the house is mine?" I asked. "Legally, yes. As of the moment I told you to leave," which was Wednesday, December 18th. Lauren's face was carefully neutral. "Hendricks is filing the paperwork tomorrow. You can move back in any time." I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, relieved. Instead, I just felt tired. "Your father didn't trust you. He didn't trust my worst impulses." She met my eyes. "And he was right not to." "I was going to throw you out a week before Christmas, Mom. What kind of person does that?" "The kind who's carrying 25 years of hurt," I said quietly. "The kind whose mother never learned to let go." Nate cleared his throat. "I think I'll give you two some privacy." He disappeared into the kitchen, and I heard the back door open and close, escaping to the small garden they'd put in last summer. Lauren and I sat there, mother and daughter, with Richard's ghost hovering between us in the form of legalese and posthumous wisdom. "I don't want the house because of a technicality," I said finally. "If I move back in, it needs to be because we've figured this out. Really figured it out. I know." She twisted her wedding ring, that nervous habit. "Hendricks said there's more. Another clause. If we can both sign an agreement, a real one, not just legal language, but actual terms we both agree to, then we can split ownership. Co-title. I'd have half. You'd have half, and neither of us could sell without the other's consent." "Why would your father want that?" "Because he believed in us, in the possibility of us." Her voice cracked. "Even when I didn't." The winter sun slanted through the window, catching dust motes in its light. 4 days until Christmas, a house hanging in the balance, and 2 women trying to figure out if forgiveness was something you earned or something you chose. "There's something else I need to tell you," Lauren said. "About 1999, about the debate camp." I waited. I didn't want to go. "Not really." She looked down at her hands. "I wanted to stay home, spend Christmas with you and Dad. But all year you'd been so sad, so distant. Like you were mourning something I couldn't see. And I thought if I achieved something big enough, prestigious enough, you'd be proud. You'd snap out of it." "I was going through menopause," I said, the words feeling strange and private. "It hit me hard that year. I couldn't explain it, couldn't make sense of why I felt so lost. Your father tried to help, but—" I shook my head. "I took it out on you, made you responsible for my happiness, and I let you. For 25 years, I let you make me the villain in your story." She wiped her eyes. "But I think I did the same thing to you, made you the villain in mine." We were both crying now, quiet and messy, the kind of tears that come from deep wells you didn't know existed. "I'm sorry," I said, "for all of it, for keeping score, for not seeing you as your own person, for turning Christmas 1999 into a weapon. I'm sorry, too, for shutting you out, for withholding forgiveness when you kept asking for it, for trying to kick you out of your own home." She reached across the space between us, took my hand. "Can we start over? Not forget everything, but reset?" "I'd like that." I squeezed her fingers. "And I want to split the house, co-ownership, but only if you promise to be honest with me when I'm being too much. When I'm keeping score, deal. If you promise to call me out when I'm being cold, deal." We sat there, holding hands like we hadn't since she was small, and I thought about Richard, about how he'd always believed we'd find our way back to each other. How he'd built a safety net not just for me, but for both of us, a way to force the conversation we were too proud or too hurt to have on our own. Outside, the December dusk was settling over Capitol Hill, lights beginning to glow in windows up and down the street. Nate came back in from the garden, took one look at us and smiled. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Getting there," Lauren said. She invited me to stay for dinner, lasagna, which she'd made from scratch, a recipe of Richard's mother's. We ate and talked, carefully at first, then with more ease, finding safe topics and laughing at old jokes. And when I left at 9 p.m., driving back to Marjorie's in my Subaru, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, like maybe I'd gotten my daughter back. 4 days until Christmas. A house waiting for me to return, and a family slowly learning what forgiveness actually looked like in practice. December 24th dawned cold and clear, the temperature finally dropping into the teens overnight, though still no snow. I'd spent Monday the 23rd coordinating with Lauren on the ownership paperwork. Mr. Hendricks was efficient. I'd give him that, and moving back into the Washington Park house with Marjorie's help. The place looked the same, but felt different, like I was seeing it with new eyes. Not a shrine to the past, but a space that could hold both memory and future. Lauren had even helped me unpack, the two of us working in companionable near silence, putting dishes back in cupboards and photos back on walls. "Mom," she'd said at one point, holding up the picture from Christmas 1999, "can we throw this one out?" "No." I took it from her, studied our forced smiles and buried resentments. "Let's keep it, to remember." "Remember what?" "How terrible we were to each other. Remember that we survived it." I set it on the shelf, not in the front, but not hidden either. Every family has terrible moments. Ours just took a quarter-century to get past. Now, Christmas Eve morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of Earl Grey and a mission. Lauren had texted at 7 a.m. "What's your Christmas Eve tradition?" "Nate and I usually do dinner at the Brown Palace, but wondering if you have something else in mind." I smiled at the phone. The Brown Palace, of course that's where they'd go. All formal afternoon tea and white tablecloths. "Lovely, but not us." I texted back, "How do you feel about Sam's number 3? And ice skating afterward?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, Dad used to take me to Sam's for breakfast. I haven't been in years. I know. We should fix that. Okay, 6 p.m.? Perfect. Sam's number 3 on 15th Street was a Denver institution. Diner food done right, open 24 hours. The kind of place where lawyers and construction workers sat elbow to elbow at the counter and nobody cared about your tax bracket. Richard had loved it, used to bring Lauren there every Saturday morning for French toast and hot chocolate when she was little. After he died, I couldn't bring myself to go back. Too many ghosts at the corner booth we'd always claimed, but tonight felt right. Christmas Eve, a new start, time to make peace with old memories. Lauren and Nate arrived at 6:15, both dressed casually, jeans and sweaters, like they'd gotten the memo that this wasn't a Brown Palace kind of night. We got our corner booth, faded red vinyl and laminate table, and ordered without looking at menus, because of course we all knew what we wanted. Green chili cheeseburgers for Lauren and me, patty melt for Nate, fries all around. "I used to sit right here," Lauren said, running her hand along the table edge. "Dad would let me color on the placemats while we waited for food." "You drew him a menu once," I said. All the items were variations of ice cream and candy. He kept it in his wallet for years. "I remember that." She smiled, soft around the edges. I thought I was so clever. The food came fast and hot, exactly as it should be, and we ate with the kind of hunger that comes from emotional exhaustion finally lifting. Around us, Denver families did the same. Last-minute Christmas Eve meals before heading home to wrap presents or attend midnight mass. The normalcy of it, the ordinariness, felt like a gift. "So," Nate said, wiping ketchup from his fingers. "Ice skating? I should warn you, I'm terrible." "That's half the fun," I said. "Watching competent adults flail around on the ice." We paid the bill. Lauren tried to grab it, but I was faster, and drove separately to Skyline Park downtown, where the outdoor rink was strung with white lights and packed with families. The temperature had dropped to 20 degrees, cold enough that I could see my breath. And I was grateful for my heavy coat and the wool scarf Lauren had given me as an early Christmas present. We rented skates. Mine were the geriatric kind with extra ankle support, and wobbled onto the ice. I held Lauren's arm on one side, the wall on the other, while Nate careened past looking like a newborn giraffe. We laughed until our sides hurt. 3 people who'd almost lost each other finding joy in the absurdity of winter recreation. "Your father proposed to me at an ice rink," I told Lauren, as we inched around the perimeter. "In Boulder, winter of 1973, he fell on his ass right as he was pulling out the ring. He never told me that." He was embarrassed. But I said yes anyway, even though he was soaking wet and the ring was somewhere under the ice. I smiled at the memory. We found it later. Took 20 minutes and a Zamboni driver, but we found it. We skated for an hour, until my hip ached and Nate had fallen enough times to declare himself retired from winter sports forever. Back on solid ground, we returned the skates and stood at the edge of the rink, watching other families glide past under the lights. "I have something for you," Lauren said, pulling a small wrapped box from her coat pocket. "I know we said we'd exchange gifts tomorrow, but this felt like the right moment." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside, a key on a simple ring and a handwritten note. "For the Washington Park house. Yours and mine. Love, Elle." My throat tightened. "Thank you." "And I have something for you," I said, pulling out my own small package. "Same caveat. Felt right now." She opened it. Inside, the promissory note from 2010, torn in half. And beneath it, a new note in my handwriting. "Debt forgiven. Paid in full with love." Lauren's eyes filled. She hugged me right there on the sidewalk. Fierce and tight, and I hugged her back, my daughter, my stubborn, brilliant, wounded girl who'd finally let me close enough to matter. "Merry Christmas." "Mom," she whispered. "Merry Christmas." "Sweetheart." We drove home separately, them to Capitol Hill, me to Washington Park, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel like distance. Just geography, the kind you could cross any time you needed to. That night I slept in my own bed, in my own house, and dreamed of Richard smiling. Christmas morning, December 25th, 2024, arrived with something Denver hadn't seen all month. Rain. Not snow. The temperature was still too warm. Hovering around 35 degrees, but steady. Cold rain that drummed against my windows and turned Washington Park into a watercolor painting of grays and greens. I woke early. Around 6 a.m., made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table watching the sky lighten from black to pewter. The house was quiet in that particular Christmas morning way, expectant somehow, like it was waiting for something to happen. I thought about all the Christmases I'd spent here. Lauren as a toddler, tearing into presents with Richard videotaping everything. Lauren as a sullen teenager, sleeping until noon. Lauren absent entirely, off with Nate's family or working or simply choosing elsewhere. And now, this year, she was coming here. To my house, our house. At noon, we'd agreed, for Christmas dinner. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken and vegetables, the kind of meal Richard used to make when he wanted comfort food more than showpiece cooking. My phone buzzed. Text from Lauren. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Running a little late. Traffic in this rain is awful. 12:30? I smiled and texted back, "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Drive safe. I'll have the coffee on." The rain picked up around 10 a.m., proper Colorado precipitation now, the kind that made the dry earth grateful. I puttered around the kitchen, prepping the chicken, chopping carrots and potatoes, setting the table with the good china my mother had given us as a wedding present. 3 places, me, Lauren, Nate, a small gathering. But after years of solo holidays, it felt like a feast. They arrived at 12:45, soaked despite the umbrella, carrying a wrapped package and a bottle of wine. Lauren looked younger somehow, her hair damp and curling at the edges, no makeup, wearing jeans and a chunky sweater I'd knitted for her 3 Christmases ago and assumed she'd donated. "You kept it," I said, touching the sleeve. "Of course I kept it." She hugged me. And this time it wasn't stiff or obligatory. It was real. It's my favorite. We ate in the dining room, rain streaking the windows, the house warm and smelling of rosemary and garlic. Nate told stories about his family's disastrous Christmases, the year his uncle set the turkey on fire, the year his mother accidentally wrapped an empty box. We laughed until our sides hurt, the kind of laughter that comes from relief as much as humor. "I have something for you both," I said when we'd cleared the plates. I went to the hall closet and pulled out 2 wrapped boxes. Nothing extravagant, just meaningful. Lauren opened hers first. Inside, the deed to the Washington Park house, newly filed with both our names, and beneath it, A photo album I'd made of her childhood Christmases, every year from birth to age 18. The good and the awkward and the terrible. "Mom," she whispered, flipping through pages. "This must have taken you weeks. 3 weeks. Marjorie helped?" I watched her face soften as she looked at pictures of herself at 5, gap-toothed and grinning under the tree. At 11, awkward and braces-faced, holding up a bike. At 16, Christmas 1999, trying so hard to look happy. "Thank you," she said. And I knew she meant for more than the album. Nate opened his gift next, a leather journal and a note. "For the poems you mentioned writing. Keep going, Evelyn." He'd confessed over dinner weeks ago that he wrote poetry in secret, thought he wasn't any good, never showed anyone. The look on his face told me I'd chosen right. "Your turn, Mom," Lauren said, handing me their package. Inside, a framed photo of Richard and me from our wedding day, 1973, young and impossibly hopeful, and tucked behind it, a card in Lauren's handwriting, "For the Washington Park house. First payment on the debt I owe you. Not money, but time. I'll come over every Sunday for dinner if you'll have me. Love always, L." I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Just held the frame and the card and nodded, tears streaming down my face while the Christmas rain fell outside and my daughter sat beside me holding my hand. "Every Sunday," she said. "I promise. Even when I'm annoying? Especially then," she smiled. "That's what family does." We spent the rest of the afternoon playing Scrabble, Richard's favorite game, and drinking tea and watching the rain turn Denver soft and gray. Around 5 p.m., when they were getting ready to leave, Lauren paused at the door. "Next year," she said, "I want to host Christmas at our place. But I need you to teach me how to make Dad's stuffing. The real recipe, not the internet version I've been faking." "Deal," I said. "First Sunday in November, we'll practice." She hugged me one more time, fierce and quick. Then they were gone, taillights disappearing into the rainy dusk. I stood on the porch watching until I couldn't see them anymore, the cold rain misting my face, everything washed clean. Christmas 2024. The year I almost lost my daughter and found her again. The year I learned that forgiveness isn't a destination, but a practice, something you do every day, every hour, until it becomes as natural as breathing. Inside, the house waited, warm and full of new memories layered over old ones. I locked the door, turned off the porch light, and for the first time in 25 years, went to bed on Christmas night feeling like I'd finally gotten it right. January 3rd, 2025, dawned cold and crystalline clear, the temperature dropping to 18 degrees overnight, winter finally remembering its job. I woke at 5:30 a.m., insomnia or instinct. I couldn't tell which, and for reasons I couldn't quite name. I got dressed, grabbed my cane and my heavy coat, and drove west toward Lookout Mountain in Golden. The roads were empty. Just me and a few delivery trucks, the city still sleeping off New Year's celebrations. I took Highway 6 through Clear Creek Canyon, then turned onto the Lariat Trail, that winding 4.6-mile road that climbs Lookout Mountain like a careful promise. The higher I climbed, the more the world fell away. Denver sprawled below me, a grid of lights slowly giving way to dawn. I parked at the pullout below Buffalo Bill's grave, where tourists come in summer, but nobody visits in January dark. Stepped out into air so cold it hurt to breathe, leaned against my Subaru, and waited. The sun rose at 7:19 a.m., exactly on schedule, the way it always does whether we're paying attention or not. First, the sky lightened, black to navy to that particular shade of blue that exists only at high altitude. Then came the gold, spilling over the eastern horizon like liquid light, catching the top of the Front Range and setting the snow-covered peaks ablaze. From up here, Denver looked small and manageable, a toy city laid out in neat blocks. I could see downtown, the Capitol Dome catching first light. Cherry Creek, where Lauren and I had our reckoning. Washington Park, where my house sat, no longer mine alone but ours, shared and sacred. The mountains glowed pink, then orange, then brilliant white as the sun cleared the horizon. I thought about Richard, about how he'd loved sunrises, always said they were proof that everything gets a second chance. I thought about Lauren, about the Sunday dinners she'd promised, about slowly rebuilding what I'd almost destroyed through holding too tight. My phone buzzed. Text from Lauren. Where are you? Marjorie said you weren't home. I texted back, Lookout Mountain. Watching the sunrise. Want to join me next time? 3 dots. Then, yes, next Saturday. We'll bring coffee. Perfect. I stayed until the sun was fully up, until Denver had woken and the moment had passed from sacred to ordinary. Then I drove back down the mountain, back into my life, back to the house that was mine and hers and ours, where Sunday dinners waited and forgiveness lived in the small daily gestures of showing up. That afternoon, I started a new tradition. Every first Sunday of the month, weather permitting, we'd drive up Lookout Mountain, me, Lauren, sometimes Nate, and watch the sun rise over the city we called home. We'd drink coffee from a thermos, not talk much, just be together in the cold and the light. It wasn't much, but it was ours. A new story being written over the old one, not erasing it but adding chapters, the kind that end not with resolution, but with continuation. February 2nd, first Sunday, we made the drive. Lauren brought fancy coffee from some Capitol Hill roaster, and we stood at the pullout watching gold spill over the Rockies while Denver stretched and yawned below us. You know what Dad would say right now? Lauren asked, her breath visible in the freezing air. Tell me. He'd say we took the long way around, but at least we got here, she smiled. And I saw Richard in the curve of her mouth, in the kindness around her eyes. He'd be proud of us. He'd be relieved we finally figured it out, I said, and we both laughed. The sound carrying across the cold mountain morning. We watched until the sun was high enough to hurt our eyes, then drove down together, Lauren's car following mine, back to Washington Park, where I'd make us breakfast and we'd plan next Sunday's menu. The house was waiting when we arrived, warm and solid, full of the past we'd survived and the future we were cautiously building together. No more debts, no more scorekeeping, just 2 women learning what grace looked like when you practiced it long enough to make it real. Outside, the Rocky Mountains glowed in the distance, ancient and patient, knowing what we were just beginning to learn, that love, the real kind, isn't about holding on. It's about letting go and discovering that some things come back stronger for the space you gave them. Every Sunday, every sunrise, every small choice to show up and try again. That was the real gift. Not the house, not the reconciliation, but the practice of it. The daily work of being family to each other, imperfect and trying, stumbling and rising, until the new pattern felt as natural as breathing. And somewhere, I like to think Richard was watching, that gentle smile on his face, saying what he always said when things finally worked out. Well, it's about damn time.